Until when Nintendo had a fall in revenue from the less successful Wii U, its CEO cut his pay in half for 5 months rather than blame workers. He and the R&D team did this when initial sales of the 3DS were quite low as well. Now it's the best-selling console of its generation. Every other console above it in sales is no longer produced. I'm pretty certain every console from its generation onward is below it in sales. Did this comment actually get to be my most upvoted? Regardless, thanks for that. And I'd like to clarify that I don't really consider the Vita viable competition, and that comparing the handheld sales to home consoles is indeed arbitrary as they're different markets, but it was just in fun. I have no doubt that the PS4 will eventually exceed it. It's a great console. In fairness, the 3DS only competitor was the Vita, which was abandoned by Sony itself. To be fair, that's not entirely true. Early 2010s was like peak mobile game era. You had games like Candy Crush and Clash of Clans coming out around the same time as the 3DS. Ironically though, Candy Crush and Clash of Clans were the eventual demise of mobile gaming for a lot of people. There used to be a time when smartphones were regarded as a serious up-and-coming market for core gamers. Now at best it's an entry drug to console/PC, and at worst a trash heap of pay-to-win attempting to replicate the success of those two. When I bought my first iPhone in early 2010, it was like goddamn magic. There was a $5 Uno app where I could play with 3 other people at any time. I got addicted. Later on it got updated and you had 6-player games. Then pay to win happened and they dumped that entire game, and uploaded a new version that requires coins of some sort to be paid per game. You'd think people could make new lame games, but what you never saw coming was old games just being replaced. Sometimes there were legitimate reasons when an IP switched hands, but generally it was just blatant pay-to-win BS. Every good iPhone game was made by either a small team in a garage or a small team in a garage that an actual company owned and threw those devs in to make some weird mobile game they didn't care about. Once they started caring about the mobile market, those teams were working in air-conditioned luxury flats and given pamphlets on all the things they couldn't do anymore. Stuff like Plague Inc. continues to be the only stuff worth playing. There are still a few really fun games when you look for them. Rare, but you can find them. 80 Days is incredible. I'm currently playing through Does Not Commute, which, while fairly glitchy, has a funny and interesting story and nice concept behind it. But I agree that most mobile games have gone down that path, and I think it's a shame. That's the problem with mobile games, hard to find good ones. Remember the Nintendo seal of quality, we need something like this for mobile games. The phone can never really win until devs stop developing trash games or microtransactions focused games. Also, games with overwhelming ads need to end. I understand that's how some of them make profit, but they need to tone down on some of them. The phone at this point actually probably has better graphics than a 3DS, just shit battery. Some paid games have real potential, like already existing juggernauts like Minecraft, GTA, Plague Inc. The concept of playing SCUM on the phone is fucking amazing, but the iOS and Android marketplace are in a state of trash where they could never beat the handheld scene, the console scene, and definitely not PC. Yeah, mobile games are mainly for wasting time rather than the larger gaming experience. There aren't workable controls in place for non-turn-based games that require more than like clicking and holding to take off. I doubt we'll see like a mobile Animal Crossing game or anything soon. I'm still holding out for point and clicks though. And there are still only a handful great games on the mobile platforms. You can have millions of players and still have a shitty game. Everyone is saying this is such a Nintendo move. But this is a classic Japanese CEO move. Many heads of Japanese corporations slash pays from the top instead of from the bottom. Sony of Japan did the same as well. Yep, also Japan Airlines CEO, Toshiba, Takata, and Toyota. This is a very traditional Japanese response to company bad news or avoiding a layoff. Can we import this mentality to America corporations? We'll even make it a tax-free import. Ha 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 ha. Never going to happen. Remember when Wells Fargo scandal blew up? The CEO blamed the CFO resigned with $100 plus M golden parachute, and low-level employees were blamed for going rogue. Sure, thousands of employees all independently gone rogue, sure. Shit rolls downhill in America. If your boss fails, it's your fault. Well, when you never expressly tell your employees to do anything illegal but set up a system where they can get away with anything and then set targets which they can never meet without doing those illegal things that you never quite told them to do, they most definitely went rouge. It's not like people were petrified of being fired for not meeting unrealistic targets and saw the path you carefully laid out in front of them to enable them to not be fired and, surprise surprise, they took it. And bam, people are having accounts they never wanted being illegally opened for them. The CEO trying to defend his ludicrous targets for each customer to have like 7 or 8 accounts would have just been pathetic if it hadn't directly led to illegal behavior and cost so many people their jobs. Sigh. Capitalism is just so wonderful sometimes. I remember seeing an article about a Japanese, maybe he was Korean, airline CEO who was only paid like $100K and ate his lunch in the employee cafeteria. That's the kind of boss I wanna be. Haruka Nishimatsu, the president and CEO of Japan Air, at the time the 10th largest airline in the world. And his salary went as low as $90,000. That is impressive. I do believe CEOs of major companies should be paid properly, after all they have worked hard, usually, to get there. But what these guys get paid compared to their lowest employees is bullshit. Taking a small pay cut during hard times could potentially save hundreds of jobs, especially the jobs of workers who are likely in the same class that they are targeting for business. I've always wondered this. If I were to suddenly get rich, how would I act? I've been poor for a while, but I also know I'd never hurt a fly just to get extra cash. Sure, I'll go to family in shame to ask for some help rather than be put on the street, but I can honestly say I'd never deliberately cause someone else to go through the same thing just to benefit myself. That's a great question to ask, but perhaps rethink whether you'd actually never hurt a fly to get extra cash. It's a different mentality when you're up there in the big leagues, not to mention I'm sure there is a lot of social pressure from your peers to assimilate into that mindset. Not saying what they're doing is right, but just suggesting that having never been in their situation, it seems a bit unfair to surmise that you would somehow do better. Why do you think that is? Because honor plays a big role in their culture? Is it like a repentance for their company's shortcomings? Short answer, yes. They take responsibility for all aspects of the business they run. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. If you want to be recognized for your company's success, you also need to accept responsibility when things fail. Really wish this is the norm rather than something unique. What are you talking about? In the West, when a company does well, the CEO gets a bonus, and when the company does badly, the CEO gets a bonus. I wonder if we could set up a GoFundMe or something to support our struggling CEOs. Like fiscal seppuku. Hasn't Fukushima's plant boss died of cancer after he refused to evacuate and stayed behind trying to keep the reactors under control, preventing a large-scale disaster? By comparison, BP's boss was relaxing on his yacht while the Deepwater Horizon was happening. Like their World War II atrocities. Sins of the father, mate. Not the same people. I work for a subsidiary of Western Oilfield and Supply Company, which is based out of Bakersfield, California, and they did the exact opposite of what you described. When the industry took a dive and oil dropped to less than $40 a barrel, it was the corporate office that bore %100 of the brunt. They didn't touch a single local branch while downsizing the corporate office to less than half. Some positions were flat out done away with while multiple workloads were consolidated under a single title. Saving the company millions by getting rid of a handful of corporate suits in support roles enabled them to maintain the workforce that actually bring in revenue. Pressuring the engineers to find new applications for equipment already on hand, coupled with getting sales to push our products to new customers in different markets allowed the company to diversify and grow despite the downturn. It was brilliant and it worked. It seems like common sense, it really does, but greed gets in the way of running a decent business all too often. The oil industry still hasn't shaken back all the way, yet I just received a nearly 15% raise, a promotion, and another 2% raise due this month. For those of you who may be wondering, this is a fairly large, family-run, conservative corporation that does business in every US state, Canada, and Europe. Edit a comma. Great of them. Unfortunately, companies like that tend to be exception than the norm. Family-run businesses are usually more ethical than public company because they have no shareholders to satisfy and able to think in more long-term manner. The government, or at least some of the conservatives, make it look easy by blaming poor people for shit like this. I don't get it, where's the logic in that? Well, the CEO blamed a lower-level exec who retired with her pay in excess of $100 million. Then the CEO was forced to testify in front of Congress and he was fired. Both had to pay back about $70 million each. Altogether about 5,300 people were fired over that. The CFO was promoted to CEO for less pay and increased scrutiny. Really sucked for the lower-level associates doing what they were told. Especially those who were fired for objecting to the poor ethics in the first place. The shareholders, 401k and IRAs, got it bad too in that they were lied to about the bank's performance in the first place. The shareholders basically paid that money to the guilty execs. The fines and restitution are paid mainly by shareholders. And all of the negative press hurts the stock price, i.e. old folks' retirement money. To be fair, the company is trying to claw back the money. Although I think most of the board was in on it. I guess that's what they mean when they say shit rolls downhill. The CFO didn't resign, he actually became the new CEO after the old one, Stumpf, resigned after he acknowledged that mistakes were made on his watch and that he had to go for things to be corrected. The difference is stock option can be liquidated anytime, with some restrictions. CEO can bail out before the company gets screwed. Edit, an example I remember was Enron. At the same time as the CEO was reassuring his employees that Enron is doing fine and they should not pull out their retirement funds from Enron, he was cashing out his stock options. That a different situation though. With Enron, the company was collapsing and the upper management knew it. Nintendo was hitting rough times, but they weren't spiraling towards collapse. And not all stock is options. Nor is it all given to you at once. Usually it vests on a monthly or quarterly basis. Or in 2008 when we bailed out private banks with our tax money and the CEOs gave themselves bonuses with our tax money and they did it in plain sight. Should have been hanged as they were the worst kind of tyrants. Seriously, just change the metal. If you caused the company to go up in flames, we just simply exchange your golden parachute for a magnesium one, watch you burn up in flames, figuratively, and actually hold rich people criminally accountable for theft the same way we would if they had stolen a pack of cigarettes and tried to sell them on the street individually. Yeah, they went rogue by having misgivings about defrauding millions of people with fake accounts. People should just trust that the top has everything figured out. Same in Europe, like with VW execs blaming the engineers with their cheating software. Sure, they didn't know about the cheating/s. My favorite part was when the CEO was asked in a Senate hearing, you have thousands of low-level employees creating fake accounts to meet daily goals and you think there's nothing wrong with your cooperate structure. And he just claimed ignorance. TBF, it's possible they went rogue. But that doesn't make him blameless. In the military, if the people under an officer are all acting terrible, it falls under the officer for creating the environment for that to happen. The upper management of that bank created the incentives and the environment for that behavior to become rampant, and did little to prevent or punish it. Thus it falls on them. Never forget. My uncle was a global VP at American Express and I hear insane stories. but he recently quit after like 25 years in the business and got paid out millions of dollars for just quitting. Insane. See, if we threw them out of a plane with a golden parachute, that might solve the problem. Even if they did, that would undeniably be catastrophic management. I think thousands of people going rogue is the technical definition of unionizing for industry bosses. This sounds way too much like China during the Great Leap. Low-level officials were forced to produce more than they could because of pressure from Mao and the others at the top, so they lied about production. Mao refused to believe the system was at fault, even though people starved, thus punishing the people and blaming it all on right-wing opportunists, while the ones at the top got off unharmed. Wells Fargo just got hit with a class action lawsuit last week for fixing house mortgage. Shit rolls downhill in American companies. Your boss makes a bad decision and the rest of the underlings have to deal with the fallout. Management looks out for each other, not their staff. This gives me a patriotic boner. Every man for himself, the American way. Triple that in Japan. Crunch must be taking an hour nap at your desk between 12-hour shifts. Can confirm. All in one day. I'm sure they work harder for sure. But there's only 24 hours in a day. They can't be working so much harder so as to justify the shit worker to CEO pay ratio in the US. As having experienced both work cultures, if you are a white-collared worker in the USA you live a much better life than the average Japanese white-collar worker. Going home after 8 hours of work is a shocking rarity. I remember seeing an article about a Japanese, maybe he was Korean, airline CEO who was only paid like $100K and ate his lunch in the employee cafeteria. That's the kind of boss I wanna be. Haruka Nishimatsu, the president and CEO of Japan Air, at the time the 10th largest airline in the world. And his salary went as low as $90,000. That is impressive. I do believe CEOs of major companies should be paid properly, after all they have worked hard, usually, to get there. But what these guys get paid compared to their lowest employees is bullshit. Taking a small pay cut during hard times could potentially save hundreds of jobs, especially the jobs of workers who are likely in the same class that they are targeting for business. I've always wondered this. If I were to suddenly get rich, how would I act? I've been poor for a while, but I also know I'd never hurt a fly just to get extra cash. Sure, I'll go to family in shame to ask for some help rather than be put on the street, but I can honestly say I'd never deliberately cause someone else to go through the same thing just to benefit myself. A wolf was drinking at a spring on a hillside. On looking up, he saw a lamb just beginning to drink lower down. There's my supper, thought he, if only I can find some excuse to seize it. He called out to the lamb, "How dare you muddle my drinking water?" "No," said the lamb, "if the water is muddy up there, I cannot be the cause of it, for it runs down from you to me." "Well, then," said the wolf, "why did you call me bad names this time last year?" "That cannot be," said the lamb, "I am only 6 months old." "I don't care," snarled the wolf, "if it was not you, it was your father," and with that he rushed upon the poor little lamb and ate her all up. "If it was not you, it was your brother." FTFY. Doesn't change a whole lot, but the saying is so well known here in France that I couldn't not correct it. This is Iwata Shacho we're talking about, the most passionate, selfless CEO that existed. His famous quote was on my business card, "I am a corporate president. In my mind, I am a game developer. In my heart, I am a gamer." This man lived for Nintendo. He helped the team working on the original Pokemon games by programming the version that would go out to America. He had passion for the game and respect for his workers. The very sad part is that he passed away with the regret of having disappointed Nintendo fans following a poor E3 in 2015. He's a huge inspiration and was deeply loved by all of Nintendo, both employees and fans. Edit, oh wow, thank you for the gold. Did not expect such overwhelming replies for what I thought was gonna be another comment lost in a sea of other ones. I'm glad I got to show people who this man was, and for people who already knew, celebrate the memory of the legend that put dreams into our childhood. Please understand. Thanks for watching. If you could like, subscribe and comment best Reddit stories for more Reddit videos.